Hello, and a warm welcome to a new video here on my channel. Today I present to you the story MHA and the Mystery of Quirks. This is part 4 of this story. For those who don't know what MHA stands for, it is the name My Hero Academia. This is a story I wrote. The story I'm presenting to you here is a fan fiction of My Hero Academia. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, leave a like and a subscription, and don't forget to recommend my channel to your friends. That would really help me out and make me happy. And now, let's not beat around the bush any longer and dive straight into the story.
If justice and the police, if the state can't keep these people in line, the people who do whatever they want with their powers, then someone else will have to take matters into their own hands. Thinks a 16-year-old Inko Shigaraki as she stands in the sunlight for the first time in years without fearing sunburn, watching the horizon brighten. And it's in that moment that Inko decides, if she has no control over her life, she will simply take it. If someone tries to take something from her, she will become strong enough to take it back. What follows is a chain of self-fulfilling prophecies. People fear her and try to stop her. People challenge her, lose their powers. Others plot intrigues against all for one, the quirk everyone fears, the ability to steal, manipulate, combine, and pass on other people's quirks. But without exception, they all fail. As those memories subside, the flood of recollection easing, Inko Shigaraki finds herself back in the present, outside the door of one of her children. It's her youngest daughter, Azuka Midoriya, who has a very interesting quirk, but that's not why All for One is standing outside her daughter's door so late at night. When she opens the door quietly, almost too cautiously, the feeling grows stronger. Something is fundamentally wrong with her daughter's depression and with the circumstances that led to it, or at least with the emotional numbness that persists even after her leg was somewhat injured. Inko isn't even certain whether it was the foot or the leg that was hurt. Either way, it didn't seem to matter, because her daughter reacted oddly. When Inko hears quiet footsteps behind her, she isn't surprised. She uses one of her quirks to check who it is and sees that it's Hisashi Midoriya, the man she loves so much she once gave up her life as a supervillain for him, if you put it that way. As Hisashi is about to speak, a faint clinking echoes through the room. Looking down, Inko sees the sound comes from a small can on the floor. With a tiny use of another quirk, the little bottle rises into the air and floats up to her eyes. Just as she suspected, the suspicion is painfully confirmed. They are painkillers. It appears our daughter is on pain medication. Inko transmits to Hisashi telepathically, aided by a minor quirk. How many goddamn quirks have you stolen, Inko? Is this another one of? Hisashi begins, his voice through the half-telepathic link sounding almost annoyed, even though they've already clarified the important things. Now's not the right time to argue about that, but if you must know, I stopped counting in the thousands. Definitely more than 1,500. I'm not exactly sure. I've also lost a bunch over time. Right now it should still be a little under 1,000, I think. I'd have to check. I don't keep a catalog, and there's no quirk that lets me easily flip through the abilities I have. It's a shame. Inko transmits. Are you kidding me? There are still over 1,000 different quirks. Hisashi says. Well, if you want to be precise and count copied quirks I have duplicates of, then it's about 3,000. Unfortunately, my quirk doesn't work such that duplicates make a quirk more useful. If a quirk is copied or I have it multiple times, I still use only one instance. It's useful in the sense that if one copy is exhausted, I can switch to another, but it's clumsy and chaotic. Also, I can't use a quirk I don't remember owning. Believe me, that's more annoying than it sounds. That's one of the unique problems I have when I have too many abilities and then forget I have one. But that's not the point. Didn't you listen? Our daughter is on painkillers and possibly antidepressants. We need to do something. We need to find a psychologist tomorrow. I won't let our daughter stay depressed. I have some quirks that could stabilize her emotionally, but manipulating emotions with quirks doesn't really solve anything. The real feelings come back sooner or later. I could probably stop her from attempting suicide if it came to that, but I wouldn't recommend it. Some of my quirks are like drugs, another is basically an emotional blockade. She wouldn't feel negative feelings anymore, which is also terrible, believe me. Inko thinks as she transmits all this to her husband. It's no surprise that Hisashi takes several seconds to compose himself. The torrent of information is a lot to absorb, and until a few hours ago he didn't even know she was All for One. Man, I'm glad I got rid of that annoying name All for One, Inko thinks, grumbling mentally about the burden of centuries and how exhausting long life can be. On the other hand, she can't imagine giving up the drive to keep living. Death was once inconceivable to her, but after surviving the operation that brought her back, she feels the old relentless will to continue returning. If you can live longer, it's usually preferable to die. Minutes tick by and become half an hour as mother and father realize there aren't going to be obvious, direct signs of what their daughter is experiencing, unless they go through her diary and other private things. Even the simple fact that their daughter's Hero Notebook number 37 is in the trash bin suggests something's off. Hisashi and Inko don't need to dig deep to see that things aren't right. The All Might posters Izuka loved as a child now look old, faded and neglected. I really didn't think it was this bad. I haven't been in this room for too long, Hisashi says as he telekinetically pulls the notebooks from the bin and stacks them neatly on the desk. Are you telling me you haven't been in our daughter's room for years and didn't notice any of this? Look at the posters. Our daughter has clearly been depressed or deeply sad for a long time, Inko transmits with so much feeling in her mental voice that Hisashi flinches at his wife's anger. This time it's not a quirk projecting anything or her murderous presence, it's simply the natural intensity of a furious mother, not to be underestimated. For a moment the fact that Inko is the most dangerous person on the planet recedes into the background, and Hisashi is left unnerved by the sharp flip in mood his wife can summon. Where the hell did that flip-flop come from? Is that another quirk? Are you actually using quirks to materialize a flip-flop? Don't tell me you're going to hit me with it. That would hurt like hell, he thinks. But there's no hit. Inko sees that waking their daughter would be worse. They leave Izuka's room, walk down the hall and the stairs to the living room, and chat a little more before going to sleep themselves. Even All for One, who could theoretically go without sleep for long stretches, finds it mentally exhausting to stay awake indefinitely.
As the next morning breaks, the birds begin to chirp and the city of Musudafu slowly wakes from its sleep as the first cars drive along streets that look like the arteries of a large organism. In the Midoriya family home, Inko Shigaraki is the first to wake. It feels like a dream to Inko as she opens her blood-red eyes and stares up at the ceiling of a very familiar room for a few seconds, her white, shoulder-length hair fanned out around her like a halo. She looks nothing like the world's most notorious supervillain. Instead she could be mistaken for any ordinary civilian, a harmless person. Ah, how much I've been looking forward to this. Inko murmurs as she slowly gets up. When Inko looks around the room, she notices how simply it's furnished. It's one of many guest rooms, which makes sense. It would be a bit much to expect to return to her family's life and be welcomed back like nothing had ever happened. I would have liked a fairy tale ending, all peace and happiness. Well, no story ends that perfectly. At least I'm back in my family's life for now. Even if I get a happy ending with Hisashi and Izuka, it won't be complete because Luna isn't here. I doubt I could convince her to come live with us. Inko thinks as she wonders what her daughter might be doing and where she might be. If there's one thing Inko must admit about Luna, it's that Luna covers her tracks well. I can't blame her for being angry with me. I'd be angry too. I know what I did was wrong. I shouldn't have forced her, but I can't change the past now. Thanks to her, I started thinking differently. If it hadn't been for Luna, I'd probably still be obsessed with world domination, and admittedly, I still am, just not as bad as before. Now, how can I keep Izuka safe and be there for her in time? Inko thinks, worrying like any mother in this world would. Looking at her reflection,
Still pale but less so than in earlier years, Inko forces a smile that could probably make most people freeze in their tracks. I definitely need to practice smiling if I don't want to give everyone a heart attack, she thinks, trying again to look pleasant. Her second attempt is only marginally better. It comes off more like someone trying not to be noticed after committing a murder, which, with that smile, wouldn't be convincing at all. It's strange that after all these years the gestures of friendliness still feel as foreign as giving up the pursuit of longer life and more power. I really don't know which childhood trauma shaped me most. I can't fully stop wanting power. Maybe I want it less than before, but I still want it. Inko thinks as she steps out of the guest room and decides to cook a nice breakfast for her family. Walking the familiar hallways of her home, she's quietly grateful for the handful of quirks she still has. They make the little morning tasks like getting dressed and brushing teeth a lot easier. You didn't have to go to the trouble of cooking. I can help, Kurogiri says in his neat suit, his voice loyal and composed, a constancy that strikes Inko as odd, since she doesn't remember embedding that particular trait into him when she modified him. I don't know if I had anything to do with that. I certainly didn't use a quirk to make him loyal. Nor did the nice doctor, as far as I know. So why is he so unfailingly loyal? That one steady tone is strange. Inko thinks, waving off her butler's courtesy as she wants to act like a normal mother. I also wanted to ask you about that new vigilante. What's his name? Boundless Hero Void, I think. Inko asks while knives hover and chop carrots as if guided by a ghostly hand, and a silvery spoon stirs the pot on its own. Yes, I've heard of the vigilante who calls himself Boundless Hero Void, Kurogiri replies, curiosity in his voice, his nebulous head tilting as if even fog can be inquisitive, his golden eyes gleaming in the dark violet vapor. I have the impression this quirk, whatever it is and however it works, is tailored perfectly to counter a certain muscle-bound idiot. That can't be a coincidence. Inko says. Do you mean to imply, my lady, that this is the work of human planning, that someone engineered a quirk precisely as a counter to One for All? Kurogiri asks, slightly surprised, that would imply a very specific mastermind behind it. Yes, that's exactly what I mean. I think Luna Shigaraki is responsible for these quirks appearing. Either her quirk, Singularity, can create more abilities than I thought, or she simply never showed me how well she can control her power. Inko says, turning away from the stove to peep through the small kitchen window into the living room, where her tidy, loyal butler stands as always, composed, restrained, impeccably kept. And what do you intend to do about your eldest daughter now? We still can't predict how she'll react when we see her again. You know what happened. Kurogiri asks. That's the point. I don't know what to do. I want her to live with us and maybe help Izuka, but I'm not sure she'd even talk to me or how she'd react. I haven't seen her in so long that I can't predict her response. I assume it won't be good. Inko answers. Just as the conversation continues and Inko wants to say more, soft footsteps echo through the house. They're not the heavy, deliberate steps of Hasashi Midoriya. His stride is deeper, more measured. These steps are light and quick, the sort you notice if you can still tell one person's walk from another's. Good morning, Mother and Sir Kurogiri. What were you talking about? Izuka Midoriya asks as she comes down the stairs, first looking at Kurogiri, then at Inko. When the silence stretches and no one answers, Izuka shrugs and heads straight for the large hologram projector, one of the latest models on the market, projecting crisp three-dimensional feeds from the world's major news channels, though many networks can't yet broadcast in full 3D. Ah, heroes, heroes, heroes. Why can't people talk about something more interesting than adverts and PR? Izuka mutters in an unnaturally neutral, indifferent tone, as if none of it matters to her. For a few seconds it seems like nothing interesting is on the channels. It's just the usual stuff that's become really boring. Then Izuka stops when she hears a name she doesn't recognize. That's new, because she thought she knew all the heroes. But this one is special. The vigilante who calls himself Boundless Hero Void, says the plainly dressed news anchor, a woman with two yellow, rubbery-looking horns on her head. She seems to need a moment to collect herself, and it takes a full 10 seconds before she continues. Is that correct? The anchor asks, irritation and disbelief visible in her eyes. Yes, just do your job and read the news, a rough, poorly behaved male voice says from off camera. If the anchor's startled gasp is any indication of how she feels, then she's very nervous and unsettled. Seeing this makes Izuka curious about what exactly happened with this vigilante. It can't be a simple matter, considering how shaken the anchor looks. Please excuse me, I myself am a bit surprised by this report. The vigilante called Void protected the President of the United States from a supervillain terrorist attack 3 hours ago. Following that, the President granted Void a special hero license. Since his appearance 2 months ago, no official details about Void's quirk as a sanctioned hero have been released. But eyewitnesses say Void appears to be able to slow down any incoming attack the closer it gets to him. Void himself hasn't given a precise explanation of his quirk. He said in conversation with the president that it's nonsense to explain his ability in public because that would also tell any enemy how to counter it, the anchor says, laying her notes aside as if they were the only things keeping her steady while she speaks. One single thing, though, he or she, sorry, it's hard to say what gender the vigilante is, yes, right, Void has given his quirk the name Infinity. He admitted in his talk with the US president that the name choice is kind of awful but gives some hint about the nature of his power. From the recorded conflicts and fights we can say the quirk seems to allow him to create an impenetrable invisible wall around himself that no attack, no matter how fast or strong, can seem to penetrate. He also appears to be able to teleport and fly, the anchor says now in a steadier voice. I can understand that. If I had a useful quirk, I'd try to keep as much of it secret as possible. It's obvious how dangerous it would be if a villain got that information, Izuka thinks, feeling nothing much for the heroes anymore. It's like that dream has emptied. Just as Izuka thinks this and Inko moves to sit down, an explosion rips through the morning silence in the nearby area. What was that? Another terrorist attack or a villain? Inko wonders, standing up to check and keep an eye on things. No, it's nothing special. It was just Boom Boom Boy, the neighborhood terrorist. Would you be so kind as to stop him from beating me into the hospital? I'd rather not end up in a hospital again, Izuka says, scrolling on her phone. What do you mean, Boom Boom Boy, and why would you end up in the hospital? Inko asks, and a murderous urge activates within her against her will. It's nothing special. With no quirk I obviously make a good punching bag for a Bakugo. And I'm too tired to deal with his shit. If you don't want it, you can. Izuka says, lying back and absent-mindedly continuing to scroll for something interesting. Something is wrong with Izuka, and it isn't just her eyes. She looks like someone on her last legs. She's searching for something to drive her. I can feel it. Is it a mother's instinct or am I imagining it? Inko wonders as the information slowly forms in her head into a picture she doesn't want to see. You are not useless, my daughter. You are promising. I can give you quirks, as many as you want. That is your true quirk. You have the power to use an infinite number of quirks. You inherited part of my ability to offload powers. You can call your quirk 1-for-1 if you like, Inko says, deciding that in any case she will give her daughter a quirk. Even if she doesn't want it, I can't let her stay so depressed and quirkless and at risk. No matter how unlikely it seems, I don't want her to be in danger, and if that means I must protect her from suicide, however unlikely, then I will. I will give her hyper-regeneration, Inko thinks, resolved. Oh really? That sounds... Izuka says, looking up from her phone. Yes, I can give you what you want. I could even test giving you all for one. I don't need that power anymore, and I haven't tested it because there's a 99% chance my quirk would not survive the transfer. With you, however, There is an 87.564% chance it would work. You are the next best candidate to have my power. You could rule this world. I mean, I'm just saying. I think it could be possible, Inko says, as she sits beside Izuka and looks into her red eyes. What should I do? Getting power is good, but for what? What would I do with power? Izuka wonders as she suddenly feels warm hands on her. You don't have to decide now, but I can't help myself. I have to do this now. I'm sorry if I force it on you, but I can't watch you put yourself in danger. Even if that danger is yourself, you can talk to me, but I cannot watch you be this broken, Inko says, using AFO to grant her daughter a quirk. Izuka's eyes widen as she sees the reddish-green misty mist from the hollows in her mother's hands. Why, when I was a child, did I always pour wax into those holes? Izuka wonders as, for the first time she can remember, she feels something change inside her. The quirk 1-for-1 moves, and it's sudden and tangible, the precise details of the quirk hyper-regeneration. It's a quirk that allows recovery from nearly any injury and can even slow the healing process if you're not fatally wounded. Fuck, this is useful. How do I already know what this quirk does so quickly? And I won't be able to get rid of it either. So a knife won't be enough to kill me. No, away with that dark thought. I have a mother back in my life, and I should tell her. I should tell her my problems. That's probably a quirk itself, but I can't bring myself to hate her. Why not? I know she could influence me or try to control me, but I'm too tired to hold back and say nothing. I'm tired of living like this. It has to change. And to be honest, I don't care how everyone reacts. I don't want to live like this anymore, Izuka thinks as the quirk inside her feels like a second heartbeat. And now we get to the oddly appearing quirks. The total number of newly emerged abilities has risen from hundreds into the thousands. According to all investigations we can do, the quirks are completely normal in origin and simply appear in individuals without explanation or warning. These abilities seem to emerge and remain permanent. There are no recorded cases of these powers disappearing or weakening. That is almost more frightening than the myth-shrouded figure called All for One. For about 5 years the quirk merchant hasn't reappeared and the assumption persists that All for One was defeated by All Might, the anchor says, and Inko smiles faintly. It's ironic that the world still believes the greatest supervillain is dead. I'm not dead, I just stepped back from my goals of world domination. That doesn't mean I won't pursue those goals later. But for now I'll make up for the time I lost with my daughter. Maybe later I'll work on uniting the countries of this world. There isn't only one way to seize world control, Inko thinks as she looks back at her daughter, who has a mixed expression Inko can't quite read. How does it feel to have another quirk now? Inko asks, interest glittering in her red eyes. To be honest, it feels a bit like having a second heartbeat in my chest. Somehow it feels pleasant. I can't explain it, but my quirk, as you called it 1-for-1, seems to let me analyze the abilities I possess. Apparently I can now say exactly how I can use this ability, or rather how it works, since the power is passive. It's a sort of hyper-regeneration. I should be able to regenerate from almost any physical injury, but I'm not eager to test that because I'll still feel pain, Izuka says, a cold shiver running down her spine at the memory of something unpleasant. You no longer have to be afraid of anyone. You don't have to fear Boom Boom Boy or any other villain, if you don't want to. I can protect you and I can give you another quirk. I will respect your will and not give you more quirks unless you want them. But understand, I can't stand by while you're a danger, even to yourself. We need to see a psychologist tomorrow. I don't know how to say this properly. I hope you forgive my inexperience. You see, my 200 years of life were not filled with family experiences or time to care about anything beyond survival. Yes, it sounds unbelievable that I, AFO, Had such a shitty life. But if you want, I can tell you about my life. Maybe it will make you feel better, Inko Shigaraki says. Silence settles for a few seconds. Nothing is heard between the two women except the newsroom voice droning on about the usual topics. When the commercial break suddenly throws some boring shampoo ad over the screen, promoted by some superheroine. Izuka snaps out of her thoughts and meets her mother's eyes. If I'm honest, I'm not sure what I want. I'm not sure at all. But this feeling of a quirk inside me, it feels right, like it should be. Maybe it would feel better if I had more, Izuka says, a slightly dreamy look in her eyes as she unconsciously reaches for her mother's hand. As Inko Shigaraki looks at her daughter, she sees that something very dangerous could result from this state. Someone who simply yearns for more powers because it feels good. That is definitely not something that should happen. Okay, I'll give you another quirk if you promise to go to a counselor or psychologist with me today. I'm not sure which quirk is best, but if you get help, I'll give you another quirk, Inko says, examining her daughter with concern. Okay, why not? If you come with me it might help. I don't know if I can bring myself to go to school or leave the house. At least not if I risk running into Boom Boom Boy or meeting Bakugo. I don't know what I'd do, Izuka says. That's enough for now. You don't have to go to school today if you don't want to. I know it's hard to talk about certain things. So I have an idea. I'll tell you a story from my past. What my childhood was like. Then you tell me something on your heart. We can trade stories, and believe me, my past is shittier than yours, Inko says, fully facing her daughter. Is that reverse psychology? Are you trying to make me feel better because you also had it rough? Izuka asks with an arched eyebrow. I don't know if it will work. But yes, it's reverse psychology. I thought it might help. Maybe it's a mother's instinct, maybe something else. But I thought it would help. If you want, I'll start with shitty stories from my past, Inko offers. Izuka thinks it's almost ironic that this could be a kind of history lesson. Her mother's childhood was roughly 200 years ago at the dawn of the Quirk era. Technically it's history class, since it tells of a time long past with very little surviving information. Yes, I'd be interested to hear. How was your past? The early Quirk era was never properly explained in school. I couldn't even find solid references in the school library or other libraries in town. I tried to find out where and how the first quirks came from, but all I found were blurry mentions of rainbow lights in the sky. School isn't very educational, Izuka says, unintentionally describing her daily life and school experience. Okay, if you want I can tell you about my school days. Thanks to a quirk I'll also give you in the future, my memories are crystal clear. It's almost like photographic memory, but more ordered and not overwhelming. I stole that quirk from one of my teachers years ago, but I'll explain that story later. One of the worst aspects of the early Quirk era wasn't just governments freaking out or mass panics. It was the human experiments and the fear of ending up in a lab if you showed an interesting quirk. That's primarily how my career as a villain in AFO began, Inko Shigaraki says, taking a deep breath and gathering herself to find the right words.
Okay, what am I even seeing right now? Asks Hisashi Midoriya as he steps into the kitchen beside Kurogiri and peers through the small kitchen window into the living room, where he watches his wife and daughter with slight surprise. They appear to be getting along in a rather unusual way. If I'm honest, Mr. Midoriya, I'm not entirely sure either. But Lady Shigaraki somehow manages to connect with her daughter very well. And I believe she is handling young Miss Izuka's problem in her own way. It seems like reverse psychology, but somehow it works, says Kurogiri as his scarcely visible hands, constantly steaming with that dark violet mist, take care of the food. Alright, I don't know the best way to tell this. I'm not a good storyteller, never have been. So I'll just tell it as I remember it. Maybe I should begin like a proper story. My story starts about 200 years ago. I don't remember the exact number. At the time I didn't have the quirk that gives me perfect memories. So I think it was roughly 200 years ago, give or take a few years, maybe 10 or 18, I don't know exactly. But I was very different back then. I was an albino, a genetic condition that makes you extremely sensitive to sunlight. So sensitive that even a few minutes in the sun could cause severe burns. That's why I still have red eyes. I know, it's surprising, but that genetic condition basically no longer exists today. I think the emergence of quirks somehow cured it. That and many other absurd things happened at the time. What many in the current era don't realize is that our superpowers are not 100% biological in origin. They're not just biological evolution. I admittedly called it uncreatively zero-point energy or X energy. You just need to understand that X energy is a force that now floods the entire atmosphere and world. This energy gave rise to countless effects. I'm rambling again. Quirks appeared at that time, but many other things happened as well. Quirks were very weak at first, really, really weak. But besides quirks, which are a mixture of metaphysical and physical, genetic elements, other phenomena occurred. The energy behind it is still a mystery to me after 200 years of research. I called it X energy or zero-point energy. This energy is the origin of all quirks and many other strange phenomena in this world. It would take too long now to go into the exact details. It's truly strange, but when this X energy appeared, something very interesting happened. The sky lit up in rainbow colors, like the aurora at the North Pole, only in every color of the rainbow and far more beautiful and complex than ordinary auroras. When those auroras swept across the world, people at the time treated it as a storm or some strange radiation hitting the magnetosphere. In simpler terms, they thought it was a natural phenomenon, which, as you can see, it wasn't. Later, when I still lived with my parents, these phenomena wrapped the whole world and the changes began subtly, then more and more until things escalated very quickly and the entire world more or less panicked. Exactly where the first superpower originated is still unclear to me, despite claims today that the first quirk appeared in Japan. It's dubious. Everything was far too chaotic and uncoordinated to prove precisely when and where the first quirk emerged. Inko takes a breath, waves toward Kurogiri, and opens her mouth. A misty portal appears beneath the faucet and another in front of her mouth and she drinks a few sips. That's an interesting use of portals, murmurs Izuka as an old impulse rises again, the compulsion to analyze this quirk and devise combinations and strategies. So where was I? Yes, the rainbows turned everything upside down, including my life. When my quirk emerged, I thought I could do good with it, or at least make life easier for my family. Even though I later became the greatest villain, my family was nothing special. We scraped by. We weren't in dire poverty, but we weren't well off either, especially because I was an albino. My mother and father did their best to care for my healthy brother and for me, well, for my albino condition. It was annoying because I couldn't be in the sun, only at night. That was inconvenient, but I always tried to keep a relationship with my brother. I really liked him, but then everything went downhill quickly. I lost my parents in what you might now call a villain attack. In my time it was simply someone who couldn't control their quirk and a bunch of others who thought it a good idea to experiment on quirk people to see if they could copy or amplify those quirks. Unsurprisingly, they even deployed quirk people as super soldiers in wars. Oh, I'm rambling again. Anyway, I lost my parents around the age of 18, after I'd already gotten my quirk. I didn't name the quirk, the term, quirk, hadn't even been coined yet. It was simply a supernatural ability, and I had only stolen a handful of weaker abilities from people who wanted to be rid of them. That brings me to a fundamental property of my quirk I want to ask about. I'm able to put passive quirks into a kind of frozen state. If a quirk hurts me or I don't want to use it, I can freeze it permanently, however it works, until I thaw it again. I want to see whether you can do that with a one-for-one quirk. Inko finishes. For a few moments nothing is heard but the ticking of the wall clock as Izuka Midoriya closes her eyes and focuses on the quirk inside her. I can't say anything about that right now. I don't know whether I can deactivate the quirk I have. Which quirk did you want to give me, or multiple? What abilities do you want to grant me? I can see you plan to give me several, Izuka says. That's simple to say. I can imagine a few body enhancement quirks would help, and a pain blocker quirk so you don't collapse in a fight when injured. Body hardening and other standard durability abilities to make it difficult to permanently incapacitate you. And maybe some quirks that make thinking easier and make memory storage better. There's definitely one quirk you could use. It's a kind of telekinesis. Unfortunately, it only works on people who matter to you, and they must consent. If they don't want you to telepathically contact them, it won't work. But even if someone is asleep or unconscious, they still receive your attempt to reach them. In a way, this quirk can even wake someone if the force keeping them unconscious isn't stronger than your link. At least, it allows me and you to sense the quirk in each other, as long as the emotional bond is strong enough. Inko goes on, slightly hesitant. It's another passive quirk I haven't really used, either because I couldn't form a sufficiently strong emotional bond with anyone or because other factors made the risk too high. I couldn't risk people I care about discovering my identity. At that moment the advertisement break ends and the news anchor returns, more composed and professional than before, her hair only slightly disheveled. Okay, am I now some kind of quirk repository for you? Can you even take a power back once you give it to me? We should test that. I don't want a bunch of abilities dumped on me forever, Azuka asks, without seeming overly concerned that her mother is the greatest villain ever, now known for stealing quirks for 2 centuries. As Azuka's quirk nerdiness comes out and she babbles like a waterfall, she realizes, in the background, all the atrocities her mother committed and the many other things she experienced. Yet even though her mother is all for one, Azuka somehow can't make herself care. Why don't I care at all right now how many abilities my mother has, what she did, or how she got those abilities? Why don't I care whether she's a hero or a supervillain? Why has my desire to become a hero just vanished? Azuka wonders as she realizes the ideal of the perfect hero no longer seems remotely interesting the way it did before. Whether it's years of bullying by Bakugo or the endless motifs of good versus evil that now seem absurd, Azuka can't say. The hero system looks empty and meaningless. It doesn't make sense that villains are simply evil and heroes simply good. Even as she tries to shove these doubts back into the dark corners of her mind, this time they don't go away. Maybe because the woman in front of her is still her mother, regardless of past deeds. There were no lies about her being a mother. Is it reckless of me to trust someone who has thousands of powers over those decades, someone who could influence my thoughts easily, someone who could be utterly evil? But if my mother were truly abyss deep evil, the personification of evil, I don't see why she'd bother to speak to me so much. If she wanted something, she could take it. Her actions don't suggest she's the same supervillain she once was. Not that I can bring myself to care whether she's good or evil. The whole good versus evil thing just doesn't add up anymore. I had dark thoughts in recent years too. I can't even count how many times I wished Bakugo would be attacked and never come back. I can't count how many times he beat me, how often he used his quirk. It all makes me doubt everything. Is it madness or foolishness to cling to something childish like motherly love? Azuka thinks.
Thank you for your attention. That's it for today. And if you want to hear more of this story, you can now go to the right side of the screen and click on the link. There you will see the playlist on the right. And on the left side of the screen, you can now see the newest video I have uploaded. I hope you will enjoy it. And then if you click in the middle at the top of the screen, you will get to my YouTube channel where you can listen to all my stories. I hope you can support me by leaving a like and a comment, and I also hope you had fun listening to my stories. Until next time, see you and goodbye.